and really got into a nice conversation about what was going on with blogs, with what the heck is new media, what's going on. And yesterday, I got a news release upstairs that said that we really needed to talk about this and to give an example of the breadth of new media. Here's an announcement that came out, Dateline, Waller, Texas. Facebook friends need only type in AJ Foyt in a search window to find out that AJ Foyt is now on Facebook. Do many of you know that AJ Foyt is 75 years old now? So I'm thinking that if AJ is into social media, then everybody's into social media. So he's tweeting and he's twittering, he's Facebooking, and if any of you believe that about AJ Foyt, you don't know AJ Foyt. There's a big difference between old school and new school, and we're going to talk about some of those things. This, for instance, is old school. This is new school for journalists. It's a very simple delineation, but it's also works for media directors as well. I want to bring up Heidi Sullivan, who is Vice President of Media Research for Cision, where she manages the overall direction and depth of Cision's research projects and all of their services too. She contributes to Cision blog and is the host of the popular Cision social media webinar series. Heidi frequently speaks about social media, public relations, and the changing media landscape at industry conferences like the IABC's World Conference and the PRSSA Digital Impact Conference. I will introduce the rest of our panel in a little bit, but I'd like to bring up Heidi, and she has some data to present rather, and then we're going to come out here. I'm going to have a mic out on the stage, and I'd very much like for all of you to participate in this. So we'll make it an interactive morning. Heidi?
Thanks so much. A little bit of a height differential there. Good morning. So I don't want to take too much time here because we really have some awesome panelists this morning. But just to sort of frame the discussion, obviously, social media, we've all seen, is really changing the way that all of us are doing business, but I'd just like to go over some of the ways that social media is really changing the media industry itself. So first of all, just kind of a quick overview. Some of the trends that we've noticed as we've started studying how journalism is affected by social media. There seems to be a growing focus on the social capital of a journalist as opposed to a media outlet. So 2 years ago, you might have said, oh, I trust this personal technology column because I read it in the Wall Street Journal. Where today, you might read that same column from Walt Mossberg, but maybe you read it on his All Things Digital blog on WallStreetJournal.com, maybe you read it on his Moss blog, maybe somebody emailed it to you, maybe you found it on Digg. But now people are saying, I trust this article because Walter Mossberg wrote it, not necessarily because I read it in the Wall Street Journal. So as we begin to see that, the celebrity of the actual journalist and the social capital of the journalist is really what's becoming more important than the outlets themselves. I think this one we all know, as you're pulling out your Blackberries and iPhones, news is consumed differently and on the go. Mobile is a huge part of this, where people start looking to get their news really quickly, little tiny snapshots on little tiny phones. And that certainly shifts the way that we're producing content, and even how we're offering a snapshot of what some of the more extensive content includes. I think we're all very aware of the decline in print media, particularly newspapers, and not to say that newspapers are going anywhere, but to say that newspapers are starting to look at new ways to make their content shareable, and to make it really relevant on the social web as well. This one I think is probably one of the biggest changes, and that's that there are these niche sites that are now available to everyone. So, you know, if you used to write for a travel magazine, but you have a definite specialty, there are now blogs for travel for people with disabilities. There's blogs on automotive adhesives. There's social networks for classic cars and for nurses. So having those really customized niche markets is really changing sort of the big business broader audience to a really specialized audience of qualified readers. It's really more direct to consumer than we as journalists have ever had access to before, because we've always been putting the message out without hearing anything in return. And now we actually have access to all of those reader comments and to be able to see who's passing news along and what they think about what we're writing. And then lastly, when we start engaging in social media, I very intentionally use the word communities all the time, because we've all had target audience drilled into our heads again and again and again. Target audience, but when you're interacting in social media, we interact as a member of that community. And if we just push content out there, you tend not to build that social capital as much as if you're interacting back and forth on the subject matter at hand. So really, what are we seeing from all of this? News and social content are really becoming more and more alike. News organizations are making their content more social. You know, if you go to any traditional magazine or newspaper website right now, chances are you can send the message via a variety of social networks, you can comment on it, you can link back to it, so on and so forth. So really, we're seeing the lines between bloggers and traditional websites really start to blur a little bit. And really being able to identify who's a journalist is becoming an interesting, murky area right now. There's a famous blogger named Steve Rubell, and he actually ditched his blog a few months ago for a live streaming site where they're short posts and it's throughout the day and not that far away from what you post on Twitter. Now, do we consider Steve Rubell a journalist? I don't know. It's semantics, but really figuring out who you can trust and how content is being produced is a big issue that we're all facing in the media industry over the next year. Steve Rubell, that same guy, this is a quote I like from him: "All media is social and all social is media." The more that our content becomes shareable, the more that we're really able to interact with our audience or community. This is just a small chart to illustrate. We took a look at influential bloggers, so not the guy who's blogging about his cats or the woman who made pork chops for dinner last night, but influential bloggers who are offering news and opinion and are becoming trusted sources. Really, it's a very small chunk of them who were formerly traditional journalists. A lot of them are amateur independent bloggers and are not necessarily affiliated with a traditional outlet, nor have they ever been, which really offers a whole nother set of issues of people who aren't trained as journalists. Here's a quote from Rob Hinman, and I know that this tends to be a little bit of a controversial quote. He's a blogger and frequent media contributor. "What's a journalist? I don't really care. I can decide for myself whether a source of fact or opinion is reliable." So, you know, that's a really scary thought, but as consumers are starting to say, I'm going to decide who to trust, how do we as journalists really start to position that? Because voices on social sites vie for influence directly with bloggers and journalists. And the example I like to use is this guy, Ronnie Wilson here. He's a father of 2 kids, and he tweets a lot about nutrition and fitness. And he has over 83,000 followers on Twitter. Now, the weird thing about Ronnie is he doesn't have anything else. He doesn't write for a magazine or newspaper. He's not on the news. He doesn't have a blog. He doesn't have a website. But he's becoming an extremely influential person in his industry with 83,000 people following his health and fitness tips. This is also another scary quote. This is a college student quoted in the New York Times in 2008. "If the news is that important, it will find me." And I think that's a total shift in how we've thought about our content. And what can we as journalists do to put that content out there to make sure that it's shareable and to make sure that people are passing it along? Facebook now drives more traffic to Perez Hilton and the Huffington Post than Google does. So I think a lot of us who have started to delve into the social web have heard a lot about SEO, but at this point, on top of search engine optimization, people are finding you through Facebook, through Twitter, through a lot of different social sites and networks. So just kind of to close this up so we can get to the panel, social sites are increasingly becoming interconnected. So instead of your website being the destination, a lot of social sites are really focusing on making their content portable so that they become sources, so that they're the source of the content, but that content can appear in a variety of places.